Just a few weeks ago, on a Monday in July 2023, police raided the house of Dwayne Davis in connection to the killing of Tupac almost 3 decades ago.
Now, a newly released search warrant reveals the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police served that warrant in connection to the 1996 drive-by shooting death of rapper Tupac Shakur.
Dwayne Davis and his nephew Orlando Anderson have remained suspects over the years, and for good reason, but there's someone who thinks we're all looking in the wrong direction, and that someone is Suge Knight's ex-capo, Mob James. He revealed in an interview to DJ Vlad why he thinks Suge Knight can't say who killed Tupac. Let's dive into it. The raid. In the latest raid on Dwayne Davis's house, the Las Vegas police were looking for items related to Tupac's murder. During the search, which took place in a quiet suburban area called Henderson, they found various interesting items such as a cell phone, multiple computers, documentary documents, a hard drive, a Vibe magazine featuring Tupac, marijuana, .40 caliber bullets, 2 containers with photographs, and a copy of Davis's memoir titled Compton Street Legend from 2019. Some people in the neighborhood saw police detaining 2 individuals during the search on a Monday night. According to Don Sansusi, a 61-year-old who lived close to the house, he was already in bed with his wife and was awakened by the bright blue and red police lights shining on their house. He looked outside and saw cruisers and SWAT vehicles with law enforcement surrounding the house. From the sidewalk, he watched a man and a woman come out of the house and followed the officer's instructions, placing their hands behind their heads and moving back slowly. The police confirmed that they served a search warrant in Henderson as part of the ongoing investigation into the homicide of Tupac Shakur. They did not say if they planned to make an arrest for the first time in connection with the murder that happened almost 30 years ago. In recent years, Davis has been somewhat vocal about the incident. For example, he revealed some information after being diagnosed with cancer in 2018. This happened during a BET show interview where he admitted to being in the front seat of the Cadillac involved in the shooting. He also mentioned that his nephew Anderson was one of the people in the backseat. However, he chose not to disclose the shooter's identity, explaining that he was following the code of the streets. In his 2019 memoir, Davis shared that almost 10 years before that, he had given this information during private meetings with federal and local authorities. These authorities were investigating the potential connection between Shakur's murder and the drive-by shooting of his rap rival, Biggie Smalls, in March 1997. According to Davis, the authorities made a deal with him. They said they would drop the charges against him if he cooperated and gave them information about what happened during Tupac's shooting. In exchange, they would stop a grand jury process and get rid of his indictment. Davis, who was facing charges for alleged murders and criminal enterprise at the time, agreed to the deal and shared the information, which resulted in no one being prosecuted. It's not clear if Davis was living in the home that the Las Vegas police searched or if he was there when they conducted the operation. According to court records, there has been an active warrant for his arrest since July 2022 because he didn't show up in court for a drug charge. Many people wonder if the raid is somehow related to the information divulged by Mob James during an interview with DJ Vlad. In the interview, Mob James talked about why Suge Knight can't disclose who killed Tupac. DJ Vlad told James that in an earlier interview with Scott Ross, who is a private investigator, it was mentioned that Knight had thought about revealing the killer for money because he couldn't afford a defense lawyer. However, one thing that is certain is that the recent search revived the public's interest in Shakur's unsolved murder, which remains unsolved and is still a subject of interest. Many conspiracy theories surround the case, and despite getting a lot of attention over the years, no one has been arrested in connection with the crime, Tupac's death. Tupac Shakur passed away on September 13, 1996 at 25. His death occurred just 1 week after he was shot in Las Vegas by an unknown person. Tupac, also known by another stage name, Machiavelli, is still celebrated as one of the most legendary rap artists in history, almost 3 decades after his untimely death. Despite his inspiring influence on modern musicians, his life was not as glamorous as it seemed. Shakur grew up in Harlem with a strong, determined single mother who cared for the family during many moves. They eventually settled in California, where he got involved with drugs like crack. However, his life changed when he entered the music industry as a dancer for Digital Underground. He quickly became famous as a rapper and started making his music. Unfortunately, his career was short and filled with controversies and violence. From his first album, Tupacalypse Now, in 1991 to his death in 1996, he had conflicts with other famous rappers like Biggie Smalls, Mobb Deep, and Puffy. Being associated with Suge Knight's Death Row Records also endangered him. Tupac Shakur had a difficult childhood because his mother, Afeni Shakur, Shakur was deeply involved in political activism with the Black Panther Party. While pregnant with Tupac, she faced serious legal trouble, but the evidence against her was weak, and she defended herself eloquently in court. After Tupac was born in 1971, Afeni's life went downhill. She had troubled relationships and moved around a lot with her family. By the 1980s, she became addicted to crack cocaine, and as a result, Tupac decided to leave her when they moved to California. Though they eventually reconciled, this separation marked a significant turning point in Tupac Shakur's life, leading him towards becoming a famous rapper. In 1991, Tupac Shakur went from being a roadie for Digital Underground to becoming a respected rapper in his own right. His powerful lyrics resonated with the experiences of Black Americans and challenged the oppressive systems that discriminated against people of color. But despite his music success, Tupac faced controversies in his personal life. In October 1993, he was involved in a shooting incident with two off-duty white police officers. It was later revealed that the officers were drunk, and it seemed like Tupac acted in self-defense. During the same year, Tupac was accused of rape by Ayanna Jackson, which led to his imprisonment. While in jail, he met Marion Suge Knight, a record producer, who offered to post bail if Tupac signed with his famous label Death Row Records. This deal created tension between Tupac, who was from the West Coast, and his East Coast peers, as Knight was associated with the Bloods gang. This rivalry was particularly intense with the New York rapper Biggie Smalls, who had connections to the rival gang Southside Crips. On November 30th, 1994, while Tupac was recording his third studio album, Me Against the World, in a recording studio in Manhattan, two armed attackers approached him in the luxurious lobby of the building. They demanded his belongings, but Shakur refused to give in and stood his ground, which led to them shooting him. Afterward, Shakur received medical treatment at a hospital but chose to leave shortly after the surgery, ignoring the advice of his doctors. He believed that the robbery was a deliberate attempt to end his life. He pointed fingers at the Notorious and Puffy, accusing them of orchestrating the attack and escalating the ongoing East Coast-West Coast rivalry. On September 7, 1996, there was a boxing match at the famous MGM Grand in Las Vegas, where Mike Tyson easily defeated Bruce Seldon with a quick knockout. Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were among the audience, and Tupac was excited by the match, cheering for the quick victory. After the match, Tupac saw Orlando Anderson in the Grand Foyer. Earlier that year, Anderson and some other people had tried to rob someone named Lane at a Foot Locker store in California. Lane told Tupac about the incident, and Tupac confronted Anderson in the lobby, asking if he was from the South, referring to the Southside Crips gang. Tupac then hit Anderson, causing him to fall to the ground. A fight broke out between Tupac's group and Anderson, and hotel security eventually stopped the altercation. After the fight, Tupac went back to his hotel in Luxor, Las Vegas. He spoke to his girlfriend, Kadada Jones, and told her about the confrontation with Anderson. He had promised to meet her at the MGM Grand, but ended up leaving her in the car. Later, Tupac changed his clothes and left with Suge Knight in a BMW to go to Club 662 to perform at a charity concert. The events of that night set the stage for the tragic events that followed. At 11 o'clock to 11:05 p.m. on Las Vegas Boulevard, Shakur and Knight were stopped by officers from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Bike Patrol. They were pulled over because of the loud music from their car stereo and the missing license plates. Luckily, the plates were found in Knight's car trunk, so they were let go without any tickets being given. At 11:10 p.m., while waiting at a traffic light at East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, two women in another car approached them. Shakur invited the women to join them at Club 662. Just 5 minutes later, at 11:15 p.m., a white Cadillac pulled up beside Knight's car. Someone from the back seat of the Cadillac fired multiple gunshots at Shakur's BMW. Unfortunately, Shakur was hit 4 times, including in the chest, arm, and thigh, and one of the shots struck his lung. Knight also suffered a head injury during the chaotic attack. Before the incident, Shakur had asked his bodyguard, Frank Alexander, to travel in another car instead of Knight's vehicle. He wanted more transportation options to go back to their hotel after visiting Club 662. After the shooting, one of the cars from their group followed the attacker's vehicle but couldn't catch up with them. Yaki Gaddafi, another member of their entourage, also refused to cooperate with the authorities. Despite being injured and having a flat tire on his vehicle, Knight managed to drive Shakur and himself a mile away from the incident to Las Vegas Boulevard and Harmon Avenue. The bike patrol flagged them down again and called for paramedics through the radio. They were taken to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, close to where their eventful evening had started at the MGM Grand. Gobi Rahimi, a director of Death Row music videos, visited Shakur at the hospital and learned about threatening calls to the record label regarding Shakur's attack. He reported this to the Las Vegas police, but they claimed to be understaffed and didn't investigate further. No attackers came to the hospital. Shakur was in critical condition at the hospital, sedated and on life support. He tried to leave his bed persistently until a friend played a song for him, bringing him back to consciousness. During this time, Knight was discharged, but didn't provide much help in the investigation, claiming he heard something but saw nothing on the night of the shooting. The police had no leads and faced challenges obtaining cooperation from Shakur's entourage during that period. During Tupac Shakur's time in the hospital, Rahimi and the members of Outlaws stood watch over him. They were worried that the person who attacked Shakur might return to harm him again. Rahimi hinted that the Outlaws had weapons for protection. Unfortunately, Shakur passed away on Friday, September 13, 1996, while in the critical care unit due to respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. He had undergone the removal of his right lung, but the bleeding couldn't be stopped despite the medical team's efforts. He was officially pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. Orlando Anderson. On that famous night, many people believe that Orlando was responsible for Tupac's murder, and some details from that time make their belief understandable. Orlando Teeve Anderson was born on August 13, 1974, in Compton, California. He grew up in an African-American household, raised by his grandparents after his parents separated. His mother worked hard as a bookkeeper to support her children, often putting in long 12-hour shifts. Orlando started his education at Taft High School and excelled as a diligent student, achieving top grades in his exams. Later, he completed his final year at Dominguez High School and earned his diploma. In July 1996, Anderson got into a heated dispute at Lakewood Mall. He and his group confronted Trayvon Lane, a member of Death Row Records, and took his valuable Death Row medallion. There were rumors that the rival gang, Compton Crips, had offered a reward for these medallions, showing how important they were. Anderson, who had a high position in the Compton Crips, angered Knight, Tupac, and the whole Death Row crew with this act. Remember the beatdown Anderson suffered after the Bruce Seldon versus Mike Tyson fight at the MGM on September 7, 1996. It was caused by the stolen Death Row medallion. Trayvon Lane was said to have seen Anderson alone and told Tupac and the other Death Row members that Anderson was the one who stole the medallion. Anderson was outnumbered and brutally beaten by 5 attackers. Luckily, he managed to protect his face during the attack, as later recounted by B.G. Knockout in an interview. This incident happened just a few hours before the tragic shooting of Tupac Shakur. Later that month, Lieutenant Larry Spinoza from the Las Vegas Homicide Unit talked to the media and said that Orlando Anderson was not suspected of the murder of Tupac. However, Anderson became a person of interest because there were rumors that he bragged about being involved in the attack on the rapper. But later, in one interview with Vibe magazine, he denied any responsibility. After Shakur's shooting, Anderson and 21 other gang members were arrested in Compton, California. Surprisingly, he wasn't charged with any crime related to Tupac's shooting. The Compton police clarified that their investigation was mainly focused on local shootings, not the one that led to Tupac's death. The Las Vegas police also dismissed Anderson as a suspect, as the confrontation between him and Tupac Shakur at the MGM Grand Lobby happened just 3 hours before the tragic shooting. Las Vegas authorities didn't properly investigate the person from Shakur's group who saw the shooting and could identify the attacker. Sadly, this witness, the famous rapper Yaki Gaddafi, was killed just 2 months later. Also, the police didn't follow up on another witness who saw a white Cadillac, similar to the one used in the shooting, which helped the attackers get away. Shortly after Tupac Shakur's shooting, a violent gang war involving the Bloods and the Crips erupted in Compton. A close friend and associate of Anderson said was also seriously injured in a separate incident, where he was shot in the legs by an AK-47. Despite the lack of evidence, Orlando Anderson was still seen as the man responsible for shooting Tupac and lived in constant fear for his life. Even though he was unemployed, Orlando set up a record label called Success Records and started recording local talent at a garage in Compton, which served as the label's headquarters. It was said that he funded the label with money from a lawsuit involving Death Row. In 2000, Afeni Shakur filed a lawsuit against Anderson, accusing him of being responsible for Tupac's death. Interestingly, Anderson had previously sued Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, along with others associated with the record label and Tupac's estate. He sought compensation for injuries and emotional distress resulting from a fight at the MGM Grand. Surprisingly, just before Anderson died in 2000, both parties reached a settlement agreement. Anderson was said to receive around $78,000 as part of the settlement. In 2011, a former LAPD detective named Greg Kading published a book claiming that Sean Diddy Combs had hired Anderson's uncle, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, to assassinate Tupac and Suge Knight for $1 million. Kading and Davis stated that Anderson was in the car that approached Tupac's vehicle during the shooting. A recorded conversation between Kading and Davis added weight to their claims, as Davis pointed to Anderson as the person who fired the shots that killed Tupac. Many people felt this was a comfortable thing to say since Anderson was dead at the time and Davis himself was suffering from cancer. According to various testimonies, 4 men were in a white Cadillac that pulled up next to the BMW carrying Knight and Tupac on the night of the shooting. All witnesses agreed that Anderson, sitting in the backseat of the Cadillac, aimed at Shakur with the intent to kill him. In 2002, journalist Chuck Phillips wrote an extensive article in the Los Angeles Times titled "Who Killed Tupac Shakur?" This article delved into the events leading to Tupac Shakur's tragic death. It suggested that the Southside Crips acted as revenge for a previous assault on Anderson. The article mentioned that Orlando Anderson was the person who shot Tupac. The article also hinted at the involvement of East Coast rappers, including Tupac's rival at the time, Biggie Smalls, and shady figures from New York City's underworld. Before their deaths, both denied any involvement in Tupac's death. Big's family provided evidence that he was in a well-known New York recording studio on the night of the incident. His manager, Wayne Barrow, and fellow rapper Lil Cease also defended him, stating they were together in the studio that evening. However, his whereabouts that night don't matter since Phillips suggested that Big might have paid Anderson $1 million to kill Tupac. Both Kading and Phillips claimed that the Crips were offered $1 million reward to kill Knight and Tupac. Mark Duvoisin, the managing editor of the Los Angeles Times, strongly supported Phillips's claims on the Shakur case. He claimed that the claims were based on court documents, police affidavits, and interviews with investigators, multiple witnesses, and members of the Southside Crips. According to Duvoisin, this narrative had faced challenges to its accuracy, but was considered the definitive account of Tupac's death. This viewpoint was reinforced in Kading's book Murder Rap in 2011, and further elaborated in Kathy Scott's book, The Killing of Tupac Shakur, in 2002. However, Scott later refuted this theory in a People magazine article, stating that there was no evidence implicating the Notorious as a suspect. Anderson passed away on May 29, 1998, at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital in Willowbrook, California. He had been shot in the chest during a gang-related fight in Compton. Brennan later claimed that Anderson's death was not connected to the Shakur case, but was instead due to a dispute over drug funds with a rival gang. On that day, Anderson and an associate, Michael Reed Doro, saw two members of the Corner Pocket Gang, identified as Michael Stone and Jerry Stone. He stopped near a car wash to confront them, and things escalated quickly, leading to a deadly shootout involving all three men, Jerry Stone, Michael Stone, and Orlando Anderson. After the incident, Anderson was rushed to Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Both Jerry and Michael Stone lost their lives in the violent confrontation. The only survivor, Michael Reed Doro, faced charges and was eventually convicted for all three homicides. After Anderson's death, some people believe Tupac was murdered solely because of his association with the Blood Gang. In an interview with The Art of Dialogue, RBX shared his opinion on the narrative that Tupac's connection with Death Row Records led to his downfall. RBX talked about Tupac's involvement with the Blood Gang and how Tupac wanted to fit in and be loyal to Death Row Records. However, RBX felt that Tupac might not have fully understood the serious consequences of joining a gang in Los Angeles. Once he became officially associated with the gang, he had to follow their rules and couldn't speak out against their actions, even if he wanted to. During that time, the Bloods and the Crips gangs were in constant conflict, and some people believed that Tupac's murder resulted from the Crips' decision to make a huge statement. There were also theories connecting Suge Knight to Tupac's death, mostly based on rumors about Tupac wanting to leave the Death Row Records. The Mob James interview with DJ Vlad also provided insights into these claims. Why Suge Knight can't say who killed Tupac. Mob James explained during the interview that Knight had a deep understanding of the circumstances surrounding Tupac's death. However, he couldn't openly talk about it because doing so might implicate him in various matters. The situation was more complex than just being present in the car with the rapper when he was murdered. DJ Vlad suggested the possibility of Suge Knight revealing information about Tupac's shooter through a book or documentary, but Mob James doubted this would happen, as Suge wouldn't want to risk facing more legal troubles by exposing anyone. The conversation also touches on Suge Knight's financial situation. Mob James reveals that Suge faced financial instability when he got locked up and lost control of Death Row Records. We can't confirm Mob James's claims, but the type of life Suge led would suggest he was on point with his claims. Suge Marion Knight Jr. was born in Compton, California on April 19, 1965. He was called Suge, a name derived from his childhood nickname Sugar Bear. Growing up, he excelled in football and track at Linwood High School before he graduated in 1983. Knight was associated with Mob Peru Bloods, a notable faction within the Bloods gang. From 1983 to 1985, he pursued his passion for football at El Camino College. Then he continued his athletic journey at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. While he didn't make it to the NFL draft in 1987, Suge Knight's talent was evident when he became a replacement player during the 1987 NFL players' strike, playing 2 games for the Los Angeles Rams. After a short stint in the NFL, Knight changed his career path and started working in concert promotion and providing personal security for celebrities like Bobby Brown. In 1989, he had a major achievement in the music industry by convincing Vanilla Ice to forego royalties from Ice Ice Baby because it allegedly resembled music written by one of Knight's clients, Mario Johnson. There were rumors of heated conflicts between Knight and Vanilla Ice, with one claim suggesting that Knight even dangled Vanilla Ice off a hotel balcony by his ankles. Later, he founded an artist management company representing notable West Coast hip-hop artists like DJ Quick and The Doc Through the Doc. He formed connections with members of the influential gangster rap group NWA Dr. Dr. Dre was one of those members. During that time, the Doc and Dr. Dre thought about leaving NWA and their record label, Ruthless Records, which was led by Eazy-E. They used intimidation tactics like showing weapons to convince their manager Jerry Heller and Eazy-E to release them from their contracts. In 1991, the Doc and Dr. Dre teamed up to create Death Row Records with Knight. They successfully secured a distribution deal with Interscope. Dr. Dre's first solo album, The Chronic, received immense praise and became a huge success in the United States, reaching triple platinum status by the end of 1993. This album also launched Snoop Dogg's career, and his debut album, Doggy Style, achieved quadruple platinum certification in the United States in 1994. Knight also opened a private nightclub called Club 662 in Las Vegas, which was exclusive and required appointments for entry. The name was chosen to spell out M-O-B on telephone keypads, signifying Member of Bloods. In the music industry, with a history of criminal connection and excesses, Death Row stood out as an extraordinary place. Its CEO, Suge Knight, would casually give Tupac a large bundle of $100 bills to cover his expenses for a weekend. The office in Los Angeles was decorated in crimson, the color associated with the Bloods gang. Outside the Death Row studio was a watchful guard with a metal detector. An experienced LA music scene veteran who once collaborated with the legendary Tupac shared the interesting observation. He mentioned that he had never seen a studio with such strict security measures. The studio keeps a careful list of authorized individuals who are allowed to carry weapons. So you need to know that these men are armed. Even if you somehow manage to get inside, a strong security force will quickly step in. Some of these watchful guards were formerly imprisoned, and their presence exudes authority without them needing to say a word. Suge Knight was known for using intimidation as a major part of his business approach. There are stories of him forcing a rival music executive to undress in a restroom and then parading him naked through his own company's offices. Even in calmer situations like when dealing with executives from major entertainment companies, a sense of threat surrounded him. One incident involved him being accompanied by a bodyguard who subtly displayed his gun during a negotiation. This atmosphere of violence worked to Knight's advantage for a while. It gave him a lot of power, allowing him to make other executives wait for hours without any objections, and to avoid paying money owed to music and video producers who were too scared to speak up or take legal action. The fear of violence also made people reluctant to cooperate with law enforcement in investigating questionable practices. Additionally, it didn't stop him from dealing with two of the entertainment industry's giants. Death Row Records, the company he founded, received financial support from Interscope, which was partly owned by Time Warner for years, and later, Universal acquired a 50% interest in the label. Knight was involved in some notable conflicts, and one of the most significant ones was with East Coast rapper Sean Combs, also known as Puff Daddy. Their rivalry escalated when Knight publicly insulted him in August 1995. Knight criticized him for always interfering in his artist's videos and songs. During this feud, Conrad Tillard, who was then known as the hip-hop minister of the Nation of Islam, stepped in to mediate between Puff Daddy and Knight. Tillard urged Knight to stop feuding with Puff Daddy. He arranged a group of highly skilled guards from his respected Mosque No. 7 to protect Puff Daddy. This step was taken because there were dangerous death threats from gangsters associated with Knight. In the late 1980s, MC Hammer also had a connection with Knight. Hammer achieved success with his album titled The Funky Headhunter in 1994, and then signed a deal with Death Row Records in 1995, where artists like Snoop Dogg and Tupac Shakur were also signed. Although Hammer's album Too Tight was never released under Death Row, he worked on songs like Too Late Playa with Shakur and others. However, after Tupac Shakur's tragic death, Hammer left Death Row Records. In an interview, he expressed concerns about the circumstances surrounding Tupac's demise. Dr. Dre at the time was no longer comfortable with the label's violent status and Knight's behavior. As a result, he decided to leave the label and create his own called Aftermath Entertainment. After the deaths of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, suspicions arose about Knight's involvement. Despite never facing charges, Knight was linked to various conspiracy theories. Russell Poole, a former detective, had a theory that Knight might have planned Tupac's murder to stop him from leaving the label. Then he might have arranged Biggie's killing to shift suspicion away from himself. However, lawsuits based on these theories were eventually dismissed. Eazy-E's incident also shed more light on the type of person Suge Knight was. Their relationship was fraught with hostility, particularly during the formation of Death Row Records. Don't forget that Knight allegedly attacked Eazy-E when he refused to sign a contract releasing Dr. Dre from Ruthless Records. During an interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Suge Knight made a disturbing remark about a method of murder involving HIV/AIDS-infected blood. This led to conspiracy theories suggesting he might have killed Eazy-E by injecting him with infected blood due to their hostile relationship. Eazy-E's family members also suspected foul play, but investigations couldn't find conclusive evidence. In 2006, Knight faced a lawsuit from Lydia Harris, who claimed she was cheated out of a stake in Death Row Records. This legal battle led Knight to file for bankruptcy, and the label's mismanagement resulted in it being taken over by a bankruptcy trustee. Facing financial troubles, Knight sold his Malibu mansion expansion and put Death Row Records up for auction in 2008. The label was eventually acquired by Wide Awake Entertainment. In 2009, an auction of Death Row Records items took place after the company's bankruptcy filing, which included some of Knight's personal belongings. Suge Knight is currently in prison at R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility. He was sentenced to 28 years for manslaughter and won't be eligible for parole until October 2034. Despite the rise and fall of Death Row Records, Suge Knight's legacy and his connection to the music industry continue to be marked by controversy and conspiracy theories. We might never know the exact role he played in Tupac's murder, but one thing is certain: the public will be watching closely for what happens after the raid on Dwayne Davis's house.